This case has been unwinnable for 30 years, and you expect me to believe that a child is going to change that. Judge Marcus Whitfield speaks these words from the bench of the Fulton County Superior Court, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades on the judicial bench and the absolute certainty of a man who has never been proven wrong. He is looking at the plaintiff's table, where a 17-year-old black girl sits alone. Her case files spread before her like a battlefield she has chosen to enter without armor. The courtroom is packed. Every seat is filled with observers who have come to witness what the Atlanta Journal-Constitution called the most audacious legal challenge in Georgia history. Defense attorneys from Morrison and Caldwell, one of the most powerful corporate law firms in the Southeast, always occupy the entire right side of the room. Their lead counsel, a man named Theodore Ashworth III, who has never lost a case in 23 years of practice, watches the girl with an expression that hovers between amusement and contempt. Her name is Naomi Adeyemi. She is representing herself in a lawsuit against Consolidated Energy Partners, a company that has been poisoning her community for 47 years. She has no law degree. She has no legal representation. She has nothing except a 3-inch binder full of evidence, a mind that processes information faster than most computers, and the memory of her grandmother dying in a hospital bed, her lungs destroyed by the same chemicals the company claims are perfectly safe. Judge Whitfield looks at Naomi over the rim of his glasses. Miss Adeyemi, I'm going to give you one more opportunity to reconsider this course of action. This court has dismissed 17 previous attempts to hold Consolidated Energy accountable. Attorneys with decades of experience, resources you cannot possibly match, have failed to make this case. What makes you think you can succeed where they could not? Naomi stands. She is 5 feet 4 inches tall. She weighs 112 pounds. She is wearing a suit that belonged to her mother before she died, altered to fit by Naomi's own hands because she could not afford to pay a tailor. Every person in the courtroom is looking at her as if she is a curiosity, an aberration, a problem that will soon resolve itself through the natural order of things. She does not shrink. She does not hesitate. She has been preparing for this moment since she was 11 years old, since the night she sat beside her grandmother's hospital bed and promised that someone would make them pay. With respect, Your Honor, Naomi says, her voice steady and clear, those previous attempts failed because they approached this case incorrectly. They tried to prove that Consolidated Energy was negligent. They tried to prove that the company should have known their operations were harmful. But negligence is not the issue here. The issue is that Consolidated Energy knew exactly what they were doing. They knew their waste disposal practices were poisoning the groundwater. They knew people were getting sick, and they covered it up deliberately for decades because it was cheaper to let people die than to fix the problem. She opens her binder. She pulls out a document. This is an internal memo from 1987, written by Consolidated Energy's own environmental compliance officer. It explicitly states that the waste containment systems at the Cartersville plant are inadequate and that groundwater contamination is inevitable. It recommends immediate remediation at an estimated cost of $14 million. The memo was buried, the recommendations were ignored, and in the 36 years since this memo was written, 473 residents of the surrounding community have died from cancers and respiratory diseases directly linked to the chemicals in their water. The courtroom is silent. Theodore Ashworth is no longer smiling. He is staring at the document in Naomi's hand as if it is a weapon she has just drawn on him. Judge Whitfield leans forward. Miss Adeyemi, where did you obtain that document? Naomi meets his gaze. Through a Freedom of Information Act request filed with the Environmental Protection Agency, who obtained it during an investigation in 1994 that was subsequently closed without action. The document has been in public records for 29 years. Nobody bothered to look. She turns to face the defense table. The previous attorneys who brought cases against Consolidated Energy were excellent lawyers. They did excellent work, but they were looking for evidence of negligence. And this company is too smart to be negligent.
I still think the jury pool
what
here
they
is
were, Your Honor, was criminal,
we just have to focus
and
on
I
the evidence
intend to prove
presented
it.
Today.
12 years
They
earlier,
are setting up
on
the
a night
cameras
when the
now.
summer heat
This
made the
Exhibit
air
A
feel
is
like
their
soup,
main argument.
Naomi Adeyemi sits on the back porch of her grandmother's house
We already
in
filed the
Cartersville,
motion
Georgia.
to exclude that
The
testimony.
house is small.
Quite the crowd
She has
today.
white clapboard
They look
with
nervous.
a garden
This
that
will be
Grandma
over
Esther
before
tends
lunch.
every morning before the sun gets
Let's
too
get
high.
seated.
The neighborhood is quiet. The
All
kind
rise.
of quiet that comes from people who work
Court is
hard
now in
and sleep
session.
early
The Honorable
and do
Judge
not have the
Marcus
energy for
Whitfield
noise.
presiding.
Naomi is 5 years old. She is supposed to be in bed, but she cannot sleep because she heard her grandmother crying earlier, and Grandma Esther never cries. The screen door creaks behind her. Grandma Esther steps onto the porch, a glass of sweet tea in each hand. She sits down beside her granddaughter and hands her the smaller glass. "You supposed to be sleeping, baby girl." "I know," Naomi says, "but I heard you crying."
The defense knew about the cover-up.
Grandma Esther is quiet for a long moment. She looks out at the night sky, shone at the stars that are dimmer here than they should be because of the lights from the consolidated energy plant 3 miles away. The plant runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It has been running since before Naomi was born, since before her mother was born, since before Grandma Esther moved to this neighborhood 42 years ago. "Mrs. Patterson died today," Grandma Esther finally says. "You remember Mrs. Patterson? The lady with the cats?" Naomi nods. She remembers Mrs. Patterson bringing over cookies at Christmas, laughing at something Grandma Esther said, her voice raspy and her movement slow. "She had cancer," Grandma Esther continues, "same kind that took Mr. Williams last year, same kind that took my friend Dorothy the year before that. The doctors say it is just bad luck, but I do not believe in that much bad luck, baby. But not when it keeps happening to the same people in the same place." Naomi does not understand everything her grandmother is saying, but she understands the feeling behind it, the anger, the helplessness, the sense that something is wrong and nobody is fixing it. "Why do not they stop it?" Naomi asks. "Stop what, baby? Whatever is making people sick. Why do not they stop it?" Grandma Esther sighs. She pulls Naomi close, her arm warm and strong around the little girl's shoulders. "Because stopping it costs money," she says. "And the people getting sick do not have enough money to matter, not to the folks in charge, not to anybody who could do something about it." She pauses. "But that does not mean it is right, and it does not mean it will be that way forever. Someday, somebody is going to make them pay for what they have done. Somebody is going to stand up and tell the truth, and the whole world is going to listen." Naomi looks up at her grandmother. "Who?" Grandma Esther smiles. The kind of smile that holds secrets and promises, and maybe just a little bit of prophecy. "I do not know yet, baby, but I believe they are out there, somewhere, growing up, getting ready, waiting for their moment." She kisses Naomi's forehead. "Now go on to bed. You got school tomorrow." Naomi goes inside. She climbs into her small bed in her small room. She looks at the ceiling and thinks about Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Williams and Dorothy and all the other names her grandmother has mentioned over the years, the names of people who got sick and did not get better. She does not know the word for what she is feeling. She will learn it later, injustice. But she knows, even at 5 years old, that something needs to be done. And somewhere deep inside her, in a place she does not have words for yet, a seed is planted. The seed of a promise. The seed of a purpose. The seed of a future she cannot yet imagine. 8 years later, that seed begins to grow. Naomi is 13 years old when her grandmother is diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. The tumors are everywhere, the oncologist says, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of someone delivering news he has delivered too many times. "We can try chemotherapy, but at this stage, the goal would be to extend time rather than achieve remission."
I still think the jury pool
Grandma
here is
Esther
compromised.
accepts the news the way she accepts everything, with quiet dignity and a complete
They are
absence
setting up
of
the
self-pity.
cameras now.
This exhibit
She
A
asks
is
practical
their main
questions about
argument.
pain management and hospice care. She makes lists of
We
things that
already
need to be
filed a
done.
motion to exclude
She
that
does not
testimony.
cry,
Quite
at
the
least
crowd
not where
today.
anyone can see
They
her.
look nervous. This will be over
Naomi
before
cries
lunch.
enough for both of them. She
Let's
cries
get
in her
seated.
room, in the bathroom, on the bus ride to
All
school
rise.
where nobody can hear her over the engine
Court
noise.
is now in session.
She
The
cries
Honorable
because
Judge
she knows
Marcus
what is
Whitfield
coming and she
presiding.
cannot stop it. She cries because her grandmother
Based on
is
the
the only
evidence
family she
presented,
has left.
the motion is
Her mother
denied.
died in a car
This
accident when
court
Naomi was
cannot
7.
in good
Her father
conscience
left
allow
before
this
she was
behavior to
born.
continue.
There is no one else. Just Grandma Esther and Naomi
This
in the
binder
little white
contains
house with the garden
irrefutable proof
and the too
that my
quiet
client is
neighborhood
telling the
and the
truth.
plant that never stops running 3 miles away. But somewhere between the tears, something else emerges. Anger. Not the kind of anger that burns hot and fades
The
fast.
defense knew
The
about
kind
the
that
cover-up.
burns slow and
It's
never
right
goes
here
out.
in their own
The
internal
kind that
memo.
becomes fuel. Naomi starts
This changes
researching.
everything,
I mean,
Theodore.
she spends hours at the
knew about the
library,
accounts.
the one place in
We
Cartersville
need a
with fast
recess
internet
now.
and air conditioning. She reads everything she can find about Consolidated Energy Partners. She learns about their operations, their waste disposal practices, their regulatory violations. She reads court documents from the 17 previous lawsuits, every single one dismissed or settled for amounts so small they barely covered the plaintiff's legal fees. She learns the names of the attorneys who tried and failed. She reads their arguments, their evidence, their mistakes. She learns why they lost, and she starts to understand how someone might win. Her grandmother notices the change. She sees the books, the printouts, the notebooks full of dense handwriting. She asks what Naomi is doing. Learning, Naomi says. Learning about what? About them. As her grandma Esther does not need to ask who them means. She has been fighting them in her own way for decades, attending community meetings, signing petitions, writing letters to representatives who never wrote back. She knows the enemy, she knows the odds, and she knows her granddaughter well enough to recognize the look in her eyes. You cannot beat them, baby, Grandma Esther says gently. Better people than us have tried. Naomi looks up from her notes. Her eyes are red from crying, but dry now. Steady. Those people were fighting the wrong fight, she says. They were trying to prove negligence. But these people are not negligent, Grandma. They are evil. They knew what they were doing. They have always known. And somewhere, there is proof. I am going to find it. Grandma Esther studies her granddaughter for a long moment, and she sees something there that she recognizes. The same fire that burned in her own chest 40 years ago, before life taught her that some fights cannot be won. But maybe, she thinks, maybe this generation will be different. Maybe this girl will find a way. Okay, baby, she says, you find your proof, but you promise me something, anything. You do not let this consume you. You live your life. You go to school. You make friends. You do all the things a young girl is supposed to do. And when you are ready, really ready, you come back to this fight. But not before. You hear me? Naomi nods. I hear you, Grandma. Good. Grandma Esther reaches out and takes her granddaughter's hand. Now help me figure out what we are going to plant in the garden next spring. I am thinking tomatoes. Naomi smiles. It is the first real smile in weeks. So tomatoes sound good. They plan the garden together. They do not know that Grandma Esther will never see those tomatoes grow. They do not know that she will be gone before winter ends, her body finally surrendering to the poison that has been accumulating in her lungs for decades. They do not know that Naomi will plant those tomatoes anyway, alone, her hands in the dirt and her tears watering the soil. What they know is this moment, this connection, this love that cannot be taken away, no matter what comes next. And what comes next is everything. Grandma Esther dies on February 3rd at 4:47 in the morning, in a hospice bed that has been set up in the living room
I still
of the
think
little
jury
white
pool here is
house
compromised.
because she refused to die
We just have
anywhere
to
else.
focus on the evidence presented
Naomi
today.
is there, holding her hand
They
when
are
it
setting up the
happens.
cameras now.
She feels the
This
moment of
Exhibit
release.
A is their main
He is the
argument.
tension going out of her grandmother's fingers, the last breath
We
rattling
already
and
filed
then
the motion
silent.
to exclude that
The stillness
testimony.
that follows.
Quite the crowd
She
today.
does not cry,
They look nervous.
not right away.
This will be over before lunch.
She sits there in the gray pre-dawn
Let's get
light,
seated.
holding a hand that is already growing
All
cold,
rise.
and she makes a promise.
The court is now
I
in
am going to
session.
make them
The Honorable
pay, Grandma.
Judge Marcus
I
Whitfield
swear to God,
presiding.
I am going to make them pay for what they did to you,
Based on the evidence
for what they
presented,
did to all
the
of us.
motion is denied.
They are going to stand
This
in a
court
courtroom
cannot, in
and
good
answer for every
conscience,
single
allow
life
this
they
behavior
took,
to continue.
and they are going to lose. The funeral
This
is small.
binder contains
23 people
irrefutable
attend,
proof that
all
my
of them
client
neighbors
is
who have
telling
known
the
Grandma
truth.
Esther for decades. They bring casseroles and sympathy and stories about the woman who helped everyone with everything, who never asked for anything in return, who deserved so much better than she got.
The defense
Naomi
knew
listens
about
to
the
the
cover-up.
stories.
It's right
She
here in their
accepts the
own internal
condolences.
memo.
She eats the casseroles because she knows her grandmother would want her to
Changes
eat.
everything,
But
Theodore.
inside, she
They
is
knew
already
about the
planning.
accounts.
She is already working.
We need a recess
She has
now.
4 years until she turns 18. 4 years to learn everything she needs to know. 4 years to find the proof that will destroy Consolidated Energy Partners. She starts that night, sitting at her grandmother's kitchen table, the house empty and silent around her. She opens her laptop and begins to read. She reads about environmental law, about corporate liability, about the legal standards for proving that a company knowingly caused harm. She reads case studies from Aaron Brockovich's victory against Pacific Gas and Electric, from the lawsuits against DuPont for PFOA contamination, from every successful environmental justice case she can find. She takes notes. She creates timelines. She builds a database of every piece of public information about Consolidated Energy Partners, every regulatory filing, every news article, every court document. She works until her eyes blur and her head aches, and then she sleeps for a few hours and wakes up and works again. She does not stop. She cannot stop, not until the job is done. Over the next 4 years, Naomi becomes something unprecedented. She teaches herself law using online courses and library books. She learns to read contracts, to interpret regulatory filings, to understand the complex web of corporate structures that companies use to hide their assets and limit their liability. She learns about discovery, about depositions, about the rules of evidence and the strategies of litigation. She also learns about the system she's fighting against. She learns that corporations like Consolidated Energy have armies of lawyers whose entire job is to make lawsuits disappear. She learns about the tactics they use, the delays they manufacture, the motions they file to exhaust plaintiffs' resources. She learns that the previous 17 lawsuits did not fail because the plaintiffs were wrong. They failed because the plaintiffs ran out of time, money, and energy before they could prove their case. She learns that the only way to beat the system is to be smarter than the system, to find something so damning, so undeniable, that no amount of legal maneuvering can make it disappear. And so, she looks. She files Freedom of Information Act requests with every federal agency that has ever regulated Consolidated Energy. She requests documents from the EPA, from OSHA, from the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. She requests meeting minutes from the Cartersville City Council going back 30 years. She requests corporate filings from the Secretary of State's office. Most of her requests are denied or ignored, but some are not. Slowly, piece by piece, she assembles a picture of what happened. She finds the 1987 memo, buried in an EPA file from a 1994 investigation. She finds internal corporate communications that were inadvertently included in a regulatory filing in 2001. She finds testimony from a former employee who participated in a deposition for one of the earlier lawsuits, testimony that was sealed by court order but referenced in a law review article published by a professor at Emory University. And she builds her case the way her grandmother built her garden, one seed at a time,
I still think
one
the jury
day
pool
at
here
a
is
time,
compromised.
patient
We
and
just have to
relentless.
focus on the evidence
By the
presented
time
today.
she turns 17, she is
They are
ready.
setting up the cameras now.
The morning of the
Exhibit
trial,
A is their
Naomi
main
stands in front of the
argument.
bathroom mirror in her grandmother's house. Her house now,
We
she
already filed the
supposes,
motion to
although it has
exclude
never
that
felt like
testimony.
hers.
Quite the crowd.
The title
today.
transferred to
They
her
look
when she
nervous.
turned
This will
18,
be over before
which happened
lunch.
2 months ago, but she still
get
expects to
seated.
see Grandma Esther in the kitchen every morning,
All rise.
humming hymns and making grits.
The court is
She
now
studies
in
her
session.
reflection.
The Honorable Judge
She
Marcus
sees her mother's
Whitfield
eyes,
presiding.
dark and deep, and filled with something that frightens
Based on
most
the
people.
evidence presented,
She
the
sees her
motion is
grandmother's
denied.
jawline, the stubborn
This
set
court
of a
cannot
face
in good
that has never
conscience
backed
allow
down
this
from a
behavior
fight.
to continue.
She sees a 17-year-old black girl from a poor
This
neighborhood in
binder
rural
contains
Georgia.
irrefutable
All about
proof
to walk
that
into
my
a courtroom
client
and
is
challenge
telling
one of
the
the most
truth.
powerful corporations in the Southeast. She should be terrified. She is not. She is ready. The suit she is wearing belonged to her mother. She found it in a box in the attic 2 years ago,
The defense
wrapped in
knew about
plastic
the
to keep out
cover-up.
the moths.
It's right here
Navy
in their
blue,
own internal
conservative
memo.
cut, still in perfect condition despite being almost 20
Changes
years
everything,
old.
Theodore.
Her mother wore
They
it to
knew
job
about the
interviews in
accounts.
church and anywhere else
We
where
need a
she needed to
recess
look
now.
professional. Naomi has never worn it before today. She puts it on now, and something shifts inside her. She is not just Naomi anymore. She is Naomi carrying her mother's hopes and her grandmother's fight and the weight of 473 souls who never got justice. She is small, but she is not alone. She is young, but she is not weak. She is about to face an army of lawyers who have spent their entire careers destroying people like her, and she is not afraid. She takes one last look in the mirror. Then she picks up her binder, her evidence, her life's work, and she walks out the door. The courtroom is intimidating by design. High ceilings, dark wood, the weight of history pressing down from every surface. This is a place built to make ordinary people feel small, to remind them that the law is a fortress and they are supplicants begging for entry. Naomi walks through the doors and feels the architecture trying to diminish her. She refuses to let it. She walks to the plaintiff's table with her head high and her shoulders back, the way Grandma Esther taught her. She arranges her materials precisely. She sits down and waits. The defense team arrives 7 minutes later. Fontaine, there are 9 of them. 9 lawyers from Morrison and Caldwell, carrying leather briefcases and wearing suits that cost more than Naomi's house. Theodore Ashworth III leads them, a tall man with silver hair and the easy confidence of someone who has never lost at anything in his life. He glances at the plaintiff's table as he enters. He sees Naomi. His expression does not change, but something flickers behind his eyes. Something like surprise, then amusement, then dismissal. He turns to his associates and says something that makes them laugh. Naomi does not hear the words, but she does not need to. She has been laughed at by better people than Theodore Ashworth. It does not matter. What matters is what comes next. Judge Whitfield enters. Everyone rises. The preliminaries begin. Opening statements, procedural matters. Shall the ritual of the court, enacted the same way it has been enacted for centuries. When it is Naomi's turn to speak, she stands. She has prepared an opening statement. 47 minutes of carefully constructed narrative, building from the first recorded illness in 1978 to the present day. She has practiced it in front of her bathroom mirror until she could deliver it in her sleep. But standing here, in this moment, she changes her mind. Your Honor, she says, I had an opening statement prepared, but I think I am going to set it aside. Instead, I want to tell you a story. She walks out from behind the plaintiff's table. She moves to the center of the courtroom, where everyone can see her. My grandmother's name was Esther Adeyemi. She moved to Cartersville in 1976, 2 years before I was born, because she wanted to raise her daughter in a small town where everybody knew each other and looked out for each other. She bought a house on Maple Street, 3 miles from the Consolidated Energy plant. She did not know, when she bought that house, that the groundwater was already
I still
poisoned.
think the jury pool here is compromised.
She did not know that the company had been dumping chemical waste into unlined pits since 1971.
This exhibit
She did
A
not
is
know
their
that the
main argument.
EPA had been warned about contamination as early as
We already filed the
1974 and
motion
had
to
done
exclude
nothing.
that testimony.
All she knew
Quite the crowd
was that the
today.
house was
They look
affordable
nervous.
and the
This will
neighborhood
be
was
over before
quiet,
lunch.
and it seemed like a good place
Let's
to raise
get
a
seated.
family. Naomi pauses.
All rise.
She lets the silence
The
build.
court is now in
She
session.
wants them
The
to feel
Honorable
what she
Judge
is about
Marcus
to say
Whitfield
before she
presiding.
says it. My grandmother lived in that house for 42
Based on the
years.
evidence presented,
She drank
the
the
motion
water.
is denied.
She bathed in the water.
This court
Or she
cannot
watered her
in
garden
good
with the water.
conscience allow this
And when she
behavior
developed
to
lung
continue.
cancer at age 67, after a lifetime of never smoking
This
a single
binder
cigarette,
contains
she did not know
irrefutable
why.
proof that my
None
client
of us
is
knew
telling
why.
the truth.
We just knew that she was sick, and then she was dying, and then she was gone. Naomi looks at the defense table, at Theodore Ashworth and his army of lawyers, at the representatives from
The defense
Consolidated
knew about
Energy
the
who are
cover-up.
sitting in the gallery,
It's right
their
here in your
faces
own
carefully
internal
blank.
memo.
But I know why now, she
This changes
says.
everything,
I have
Theodore.
spent 4 years
They
learning
knew
why.
about the accounts.
I have read every
need a
document,
recess
every
now.
filing, every piece of evidence that exists about what Consolidated Energy Partners has done to my community. And I am here today to tell you that what happened to my grandmother was not an accident. It was not bad luck. It was not the result of negligence or oversight or honest mistakes. It was murder. She lets the word hang in the air. Murder. Theodore Ashworth rises. Objection, Your Honor. This is inflammatory and improper. The plaintiff is not qualified to make such accusations, and this case is a civil matter, not criminal. Judge Whitfield looks at Naomi. Miss Adeyemi? Naomi does not back down. Your Honor, I am not accusing Consolidated Energy of criminal murder. That would be a matter for the district attorney. What I am saying is that the evidence I will present in this trial shows a pattern of deliberate, knowing conduct that caused the deaths of 473 people. The defendant knew their operations were harmful. They chose to continue anyway. And if that is not murder in the legal sense, it is certainly murder in the moral sense. The judge considers this. Overruled, he says. Continue, be Miss Adeyemi. But I advise you to stay within the bounds of the civil claims you have filed. Naomi nods. Thank you, Your Honor. She turns back to the courtroom. Over the next several days, I am going to present evidence that Consolidated Energy Partners knew about groundwater contamination as early as 1987. I am going to present evidence that they deliberately concealed this knowledge from regulators and from the public. I am going to present evidence that they calculated the cost of remediation versus the cost of litigation and concluded that it was cheaper to let people die than to fix the problem. And I am going to present evidence that they have been following this same playbook for nearly 40 years, using their army of lawyers to exhaust plaintiffs and bury the truth. She looks at the jury. 12 faces. We're 12 ordinary people who have been pulled from their lives to sit in judgment. Some of them look skeptical, some look curious. One, a middle-aged black woman in the front row, looks like she might already be on Naomi's side. I am not a lawyer, Naomi says. I am a 17-year-old girl from Cartersville who taught herself law because nobody else was going to fight for my community. The defendant is going to tell you that I am not qualified to be here, that I do not understand the complexities of the case, that I should have hired a real attorney to represent me. She smiles. It is not a happy smile. It is the smile of someone who has nothing left to lose. But here is the thing. I did not have money for a real attorney. Neither did anyone else in my community. And that is exactly what Consolidated Energy was counting on. But they have spent decades making sure that nobody could afford to fight them. They have made this case too expensive, too complicated, too exhausting for ordinary people to pursue. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. The trial lasts 11 days. 11 days of testimony, of evidence, of Theodore Ashworth's increasingly desperate attempts to discredit a 17-year-old girl who seems to know more about his client's operations than his client does.
They are setting up the cameras
Naomi
now.
calls witnesses, former employees who testify about the disposal practices they observed, medical experts who explain the link between the chemicals found in the groundwater and the diseases that killed so many residents,
This will be over
an
before
environmental
lunch.
engineer who analyzes the soil
Let's
and water
get seated.
samples and confirms contamination levels
All
far
rise.
above legal limits.
The
She
court is
introduces
now in
documents.
session. The Honorable
Made the
Judge Marcus
1987
Whitfield
memo,
presiding.
internal emails discussing the cost-benefit analysis
Based on
of
the evidence
remediation,
presented, the
board
motion
meeting
is
minutes
denied.
showing that executives were briefed
This
on
court
contamination
cannot in
risks
good
and chose
conscience
to do
allow
nothing.
this behavior to
She builds her
continue.
case piece by piece, the way she built her binder,
This
the way her
binder
grandmother built her
contains
garden.
irrefutable proof that my
But
client
the
is
most
telling
powerful
the
moment
truth.
comes on day 7, when Naomi calls her final witness. She calls herself. She takes the stand and swears to tell the truth. Then she begins to talk. She talks about her grandmother,
The defense
about
knew
the
about
garden
the cover-up.
and the sweet tea
It's right
and the
here
nights
in
on the
their
back
own
porch,
internal memo.
looking at stars dimmed by the lights from the plant.
This
She
changes
talks about
everything,
watching her
Theodore.
grandmother get sicker
They
and
knew
sicker,
about the
about the
accounts.
diagnosis,
We need
about
a
the
recess
hospice
now.
bed in the living room, and the hand growing cold in the gray pre-dawn light. She talks about the promise she made, like about the 4 years of research and learning and preparation, about the moment she realized that the previous lawsuits had failed because they were asking the wrong questions. I knew I could not prove negligence, she says. Consolidated Energy has too many lawyers, too many resources, too much experience hiding behind legal technicalities. So I stopped trying to prove negligence. Instead, I asked a different question. What if they were not negligent? What if they knew exactly what they were doing? What if there was proof? She looks at the jury. I found the proof. You have seen it. Internal documents showing that the company knew about contamination for decades. Evidence that they deliberately concealed this knowledge. Testimony from former employees who were ordered to falsify records. William, this is not a case about a company making honest mistakes. This is a case about a company choosing profits over people's lives. Theodore Ashworth objects. He objects to the characterization. He objects to the emotional appeals. He objects to everything, because that is all he has left. But the objections do not matter anymore. The jury has heard the evidence. They have seen the documents. They have looked at the faces of the people who lost family members to this company's greed. And something has shifted in the room. The skepticism is gone. In its place is something else. Recognition, understanding, maybe even outrage. Naomi delivers her closing argument on day 11. She has been saving this for last, the final piece of the puzzle that will bring everything together. She stands in front of the jury, 12 faces. Be 12 people who have spent almost 2 weeks listening to her story. The defense is going to tell you that I am just a child, she says, that I am not qualified to bring this case, that I do not understand the law or the science or the complexity of what happened. She pauses. They are right about one thing. I am young. I am not a lawyer. I learned everything I know from books and documents and the determination to find the truth. But here is what they do not understand. I did not need to be a lawyer to see what was happening. I did not need a degree to understand that my grandmother was dying because of something that should never have been in our water. I did not need credentials to read a memo that said, in plain English, that the company knew their operations were poisoning people and chose to do nothing. She gestures toward the evidence table, where her binder sits among stacks of documents. The law is not magic. The law is just rules. Rules that are supposed to protect people from exactly this kind of harm. And for 30 years, Consolidated Energy has used those rules against us. They have used procedural delays and expensive legal teams and the sheer exhaustion of fighting to make sure nobody ever held them accountable. They made this case unwinnable, but they made a mistake. They assumed that nobody would ever care enough to fight through all the obstacles. They assumed that poor people, black people, people without resources would eventually give up. They assumed that we would run out of time, money, and energy before we could prove our case. She looks directly at the jury. They were wrong. I did not give up.
I still think
I
the jury
found the
pool
proof.
here is compromised.
And now you
We
have
just
it.
have to focus on
You
the
have
evidence
internal
presented
documents
today.
showing that Consolidated Energy
are setting up the
knew
cameras
about
now.
contamination
This
in
exhibit A is
1987
their
and
main
covered it up.
argument.
You have testimony from employees who witnessed the
We
cover-up.
already filed the
You
motion
have
to
expert
exclude that
testimony
testimony.
linking the contamination
crowd today.
to the diseases
They
that
look
killed
nervous. This will be over
473
before
people
lunch.
in my community.
Let's get
This is
seated.
not a close case. This is not
All
a case
rise.
where reasonable people can disagree.
Court is now in
This
session.
is a case
The Honorable
where a
Judge
corporation
Marcus Whitfield
decided
presiding.
that our lives were worth less than their profits.
Based
And
on
they
the
were
evidence
wrong about that
presented,
too.
The motion is denied.
She takes a breath.
This court cannot,
When you go
in
into
good
that jury
conscience,
room,
allow this
I
behavior
want you to think
continue.
about my grandmother. Think about a woman who never smoked a
This
cigarette,
binder
who ate
contains
well and
irrefutable
exercised
proof
and did
that my
everything
client
right,
is telling
and
the
who still
truth.
died of lung cancer because the water she drank for 42 years was poisoned. We think about the 472 other people like her. Think about the children who grew up sick, the families
The
who
defense
lost everything,
knew about the cover-up.
community that has
It's
been
right here
decimated
in their
by
own
disease.
internal memo.
And then I want you to do something that nobody has done in
changes
30
everything,
years.
Theodore.
I want you to hold them
They knew
accountable.
about the
I want you to
accounts.
tell the world
We
that
need
no
a
matter
recess
how
now.
much money you have, no matter how many lawyers you can hire, you cannot buy your way out of justice. I want you to tell Consolidated Energy that the people they poisoned mattered, that our lives were worth something, that we deserve justice. She steps back from the jury box. Thank you. The jury deliberates for 6 hours and 14 minutes. When they return, the courtroom is packed. News cameras have been allowed inside for the verdict. Reporters from every major outlet are pressed against the walls, their phones ready to broadcast the decision to the world. Naomi sits alone at the plaintiff's table. She has been alone through all of this, except for the ghost of her grandmother and the memory of her mother and the weight of 473 souls pressing against her shoulders. She is not afraid. Whatever happens, she has done everything she could. She has fought the fight that no one else would fight. She has stood in a courtroom and told the truth, and the whole world has listened. That is already more than anyone expected from a 17-year-old girl from Cartersville. The jury foreperson stands, the middle-aged black woman from the front row. Her hands are shaking slightly as she holds the verdict form. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asks. We have, Your Honor. On the claim of fraudulent concealment, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. On the claim of intentional infliction of emotional distress, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. On the claim of negligence resulting in wrongful death, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. On the question of damages, what amount has the jury determined? The foreperson looks up. For the first time, she looks directly at Naomi. We award compensatory damages in the amount of $473 million, she says, $1 million for each life lost, and we award punitive damages in the amount of $2 billion, to send a message that this can never happen again. The courtroom erupts, gasps, shouts, the click of cameras, the buzz of phones as reporters race to file their stories. Theodore Ashworth sits frozen at the defense table, his face gray, his hands flat on the wood in front of him, as if he is afraid he will fall over if he lets go. But Naomi does not move. She sits perfectly still at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded, her eyes closed. She is not celebrating. She is praying. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispers. "We did it. We finally did it." The aftermath is chaos in the best possible way. News coverage of the verdict dominates every channel for days. Legal experts analyze the case. Corporate governance consultants warn their clients about the implications. Environmental justice advocates hold the verdict up as a landmark victory, proof that communities can fight back against corporate power. Consolidated Energy Partners announces they will appeal, but everyone knows it is over. said the evidence is too damning. The verdict is too clear. The company's stock price drops 47% in the first week. Within 3 months, they file for bankruptcy. Within 6 months, federal prosecutors announced criminal charges against 3 former executives, including the
I still think the
CEO,
jury
who
pool here is
oversaw the cover-up.
compromised.
The
We just have
settlement
to
fund
focus
is
on the evidence
established.
presented today.
Families who lost loved ones
They are
begin
setting up
receiving
the cameras
payments.
now.
This
Medical
Exhibit A
monitoring
is their
programs
main
are set up
argument.
for current residents. The contaminated soil begins
We
to be
already filed the
remediated,
motion to
a
exclude
process
that
that will take
testimony.
years
Quite the
and
crowd
cost
today.
hundreds of millions
They
of
look
dollars.
nervous. This will be
But
over
for
before
Naomi,
lunch.
the victory feels hollow.
Let's get seated.
She stands in the garden behind her grandmother's
All
house,
rise.
looking at the tomatoes
The
that have
court is
finally
now
grown
in
tall
session.
and
The
red and
Honorable
ripe.
Judge Marcus
She
Whitfield
picks
presiding.
one and holds it in her palm, feeling the weight
Based
of
on
it.
the evidence presented,
Judging the warmth
the
of the
motion
sun
is
still
denied.
trapped inside.
This court
She wishes her
cannot
grandmother
in
could
good
taste it.
conscience allow
She
this
wishes her mother
behavior
could
to
see what
continue.
she has become. She wishes that justice did not have
This
to wait
binder
until everyone who
contains
deserved it was
irrefutable
already gone.
proof that my
But
client
wishes
is telling
are
the
for
truth.
children, and Naomi has not been a child for a very long time. She takes a bite of the tomato. The juice runs down her chin. It is the best thing she has ever tasted. She sits
The
down in the
defense
garden,
knew about the
surrounded by the
cover-up.
plants her
It's right
grandmother
here in
taught
their
her to
own
grow,
internal
and she
memo.
lets herself cry. Not the angry
This
tears
changes
of someone
everything,
fighting an
Theodore.
impossible fight.
They knew about the
The
accounts.
tired tears of
We need a
someone who has
recess
finally
now.
won and does not quite know what to do next. She cries for her grandmother, for her mother, for the 473 people who died waiting for someone to listen. So she cries for the little girl who sat on the back porch and asked why nobody would stop the people making everyone sick. And then, when the tears are done, she stands up. She wipes her face. She walks back into the house and begins planning her next move. Because this fight is over, but there are other fights waiting. Other communities being poisoned. Other corporations counting on the exhaustion and poverty of their victims to protect them from accountability. Naomi is only 17. She has her whole life ahead of her. She has already proven that one person, with enough determination and enough evidence, can bring down giants. She wonders what she will be able to accomplish with more time, more resources, more experience. She sits at her grandmother's kitchen table and opens her laptop. She begins to research. The phone starts ringing an hour later. Law schools offering scholarships, advocacy organizations asking her to speak, journalists requesting interviews, politicians wanting to associate themselves with her victory. She ignores most of them. She has work to do. But one call she takes. It is from a woman named Patricia Okafor, the director of a nonprofit called the Environmental Justice Coalition. She has been following Naomi's case for months. She has resources, connections, expertise that she wants to put at Naomi's disposal. I do not want to use you, Patricia says. I want to help you. I want to help you help other people. There are communities all over this country who are going through what Cartersville went through. They need someone who can do what you did. They need hope. Naomi thinks about this. She thinks about her grandmother, about the promise she made, about the garden and the tomatoes and the years of work that led to this moment. She thinks about the 473 people whose deaths finally meant something. And she thinks about all the other people in all the other places who are still waiting for someone to fight for them. Okay, she says, tell me more. 2 years after the verdict, Naomi Adeyemi stands at a podium in the Great Hall of the Department of Justice. She is 19 years old. She is wearing a new suit, one she bought with her own money from the portion of the settlement she received for her grandmother's death. She is about to address a conference on environmental justice, speaking to lawyers, regulators, and advocates from across the country. She looks out at the audience. She sees Patricia Okafor in the front row, beaming with pride. She sees representatives from the EPA, the FBI, the CDC. She sees lawyers from firms that once would not have given her the time of day. She sees journalists who have covered her story, academics who have studied her case, activists who have been inspired by her example. She sees the world that told her she did not belong, finally ready to listen. I am not here to tell you that one person can change the world, she says. That is a lie we tell children to make them feel better about their powerlessness. The truth is that one person cannot change the
I still
world,
think the jury
not
pool
alone.
here is compromised.
What one person can do
We just
is
have to focus
refuse
on
to
the
give
evidence
up.
presented today.
What one person can do is find
They
the
are
proof.
setting up the cameras now.
What one
This
person can
Exhibit
do
A is
is
their
stand in
main
a courtroom
argument.
and tell the truth until somebody finally listens. But that
We already
person
filed the motion
needs
to exclude
help.
that testimony.
That person
Quite the
needs
crowd today.
resources.
They look nervous.
That
This will
person
be over
needs a
before
system
lunch.
that makes justice possible
Let's
instead
get
of
seated.
impossible. She pauses.
All rise.
For 30 years, my community
Court is
tried to
now
get
in
justice.
session. The Honorable
17
Judge Marcus
lawsuits,
Whitfield presiding.
hundreds of lawyers, thousands of hours of work,
Based on
and
the
every
evidence
single
presented,
attempt
the
failed
motion is
because the
denied.
system was designed to
This
protect the
court
powerful,
cannot, in
not the
good
people they
conscience, allow
harmed.
this behavior to
I
continue.
won my case because I was lucky. I found a document that
This
should have
binder
been destroyed,
contains
that was
irrefutable
accidentally
proof
preserved
that my
in a file
client
that
is
nobody
telling the
bothered to
truth.
check. I won because one juror believed me when nobody else did. I won because I had nothing else to lose. But luck is not a system. Hope is not a strategy. We cannot build justice
defense
on the backs
knew
of
about the
individual
cover-up.
heroes
It's
who
right
happen to
here in
find the
their
right
own
piece of
internal
evidence at the
memo.
right time. We need to change the rules.
This changes everything.
She looks out at the audience.
They knew about
Every
the accounts.
face is turned toward her.
We need a recess
Every
now.
ear is listening. We need discovery processes that force corporations to reveal their documents instead of letting them hide behind privilege claims. We need regulatory agencies with the resources to actually investigate complaints instead of filing them away and forgetting. We need courts that prioritize justice over efficiency, that give plaintiffs time to build their cases instead of rushing them through a system designed to favor defendants. And we need to believe as a society that the lives of poor people and black people and communities without political power matter just as much as the lives of everyone else. She steps back from the podium. My grandmother died, believing that nobody would ever listen. She was wrong. You are listening now. The question is what you are going to do about it. The audience erupts in applause, standing ovation, camera flashes, the buzz of reporters rushing to file their stories. But Naomi is not looking at them. She is looking at the back of the room, at the empty doorway, at the space where her grandmother should be standing, watching her granddaughter finish what she started. She is not there. She will never be there. The victory belongs to the dead as much as the living, and the dead are gone forever. But their memory lives on. In the garden behind the house, on Maple Street, in the settlement fund that bears Grandma Esther's name, in the laws that are being changed, the corporations that are being held accountable, the communities that are finally getting the help they deserve, in the 17-year-old girl who taught herself law and walked into a courtroom and refused to lose. Well, that girl is a woman now. She has a law degree from Yale, paid for by one of the many scholarships she was offered after the verdict. She has argued cases before the Supreme Court. She has helped draft legislation that strengthens environmental protections across the country. She has inspired a generation of young lawyers who look at the system that told them they did not belong and say, not anymore. She has done everything her grandmother dreamed of and more, and she is just getting started. Have you ever been told that your fight is hopeless? That the odds are too long, the enemy too powerful, the obstacles too great? Have you ever looked at a system designed to crush you and wondered if there was any point in trying? This story is for you, not because it will solve your problems, not because it will make your fight any easier, but because it proves that impossible is not the same as permanent. For 30 years, everyone who looked at Cartersville saw a community that could not be helped. They saw a corporation that could not be beaten. They saw a fight that could not be won. They were looking at the wrong things. They should have been looking at the little girl on the back porch, asking her grandmother why nobody would stop the people making everyone sick. They should have been looking at the teenager in the library, teaching herself law from books and documents and determination. They should have been looking at the young woman in the courtroom, standing alone against an army of lawyers and refusing to flinch. The system is real. The obstacles are real. The power that oppresses us is real. But so is our power to resist. So is our capacity to fight.
I still think
So
the
is
jury
the
pool
truth
here is
that burns
compromised.
inside us,
We
waiting
just
for
have
the
to focus
moment
on
when
the
someone
evidence presented
finally
today.
listens. Naomi
They are setting
Adeyemi
up the
found
cameras
her
now.
moment.
This exhibit
She created
A
her
is their
moment
main
through
argument.
years of work and sacrifice and an absolute refusal to
We
accept
already
defeat.
filed the motion to exclude
She took
that
a case
testimony.
that everyone said
Quite
was
the crowd
unwinnable,
today.
and she won
They
it.
look nervous.
Not because she
This
was
will be
lucky
over
or
before
special
lunch.
or blessed, but because she worked
Let's get
harder than
seated.
anyone else, and she never gave up.
All
You can do
rise.
the same. Not the same
The
way,
court is now in
not the
session.
same fight,
The Honorable Judge
but with the
Marcus
same
Whitfield
determination.
presiding.
The same refusal to accept the limits that others
Based on the
try
evidence
to
presented,
impose.
the
The
motion
same
is
belief
denied.
that justice is
This
not a
court
gift
cannot
given
in
by the
good
powerful,
conscience allow
but a
this
right
behavior to
taken by
continue.
those who demand it. The courtroom erupted when the
binder
verdict was
contains
read.
irrefutable
The whole
proof
world
that my
seemed to
client
shift on
is
its
telling the
axis,
truth.
just for a moment, as the impossible became real. Yeah, but the eruption was not the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of change. The beginning of accountability. The beginning of
The
a
defense
world where
knew about
communities
the
like
cover-up.
Cartersville
It's
do
right
not
here
have
in
to
their
wait
own
30
internal
years for
memo.
someone to listen. That world does not exist yet.
Changes everything,
Not fully.
Theodore.
Not
They
everywhere.
knew about the
But
accounts.
it is coming.
We need a
Every
recess
case that is
now.
won, every law that is changed, every corporation that is held accountable brings it a little closer. Every young person who looks at Naomi's story and thinks, I can do that too, makes it a little more real. You are part of that world. Whether you know it or not, whether you choose it or not, you are part of the fight. The question is whether you will sit in the stands and watch, or whether you will step into the courtroom and demand to be heard. Naomi made her choice. She made it when she was 5 years old, me listening to her grandmother cry. She made it when she was 13, sitting at her dying grandmother's bedside. She made it every day for 4 years, teaching herself law and building her case and refusing to let the system defeat her. She is still making it now, every day, as she fights for people who cannot fight for themselves. What choice will you make? The courtroom is waiting. The world is watching. The fight is calling. And somewhere out there, a little girl is sitting on her grandmother's porch, asking why nobody will stop the people who are hurting her community. She needs to know that someone is coming. She needs to know that the fight is not hopeless. She needs to know that even the most powerful enemies can be defeated if someone is willing to stand up and tell the truth. Be that someone. The verdict is in your hands.